Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about 3 exercises that I think should be in your arsenal if you really need to get your triceps bigger and stronger. And of course, as you guys know, a lot of these informative videos I make 4 or 5 months before they actually get uploaded. I have a very large reserve of them, and I tend to make them in big blocks. But on these today, we'll see me doing some stuff I started doing together, and we'll see what happens with my triceps. By the time this video comes out, hopefully my triceps are bigger and stronger. My bench is way up. And if not, then well, we can laugh about it. But as far as what I have a lot of my clients do in general, when I have clients who need more tricep, these are go-to exercises, and it's going to be close grip benching, floor pressing, JM presses. And the reason I like these big exercises is not to say I don't like dips and stuff. I think dips, for example, are phenomenal for triceps. Not everyone can do dips. There can be balance problems, other things. But, don't get me wrong. Dips are great. They're a great tricep exercise, particularly weighted dips. If you get strong enough to do weighted dips. But these are exercises that I really like because they all really carry over to bench pressing in general. And for some of us like me, I'm stronger on close grip bench anyway, so I tend to just close grip bench. But the floor press, which you see me doing here at the start, particularly with chains, the floor press itself is actually a phenomenal chest builder. I tend to think of it as a chest builder, but a lot of my lifters get a lot of tricep development out of it. And I do notice that when I load chains up on it, when I'm doing rep work, I do get a very, very large amount of tricep activation. I don't get it on maxes though. I don't feel my triceps at all. It feels like all chest. But again, it's a big movement that we can completely control the range of motion on. There's no ambiguity on it. And it lets us lock out a fair amount of weight on a big movement in a way that carries over to the bench press. Because a floor press essentially just takes the leg drive and lats out of a bench. And depending upon how thick you are, the range of motion may or may not be pretty similar to your bench press. But if it's more of a lockout movement for you, then it definitely hits your triceps hard. If you're someone who has a very, very big gap between their chest and the bar at the bottom, it'll be great for that. And if you have a smaller gap like I do, chains can bridge that gap. Chains can bridge that gap very, very easily. I also love close grip pressing, and that's an obvious one. Most people understand the close grip press. They understand that it is a big tricep builder that also builds the chest, and it's always been a mainstay in people's tricep training. And it's interestingly enough, it's fairly ubiquitous. You see both large amounts of bodybuilders throughout the years, and obviously power lifters who do that. And of course, I'm on the strength end, and I don't really care about bodybuilding, but it is worth noting there are plenty of bodybuilders who utilize the close grip press as a major tricep movement. And one of the things you guys will notice, I'm not a big fan of doing large amounts of smaller exercises for them. I do it in phases, but here's the problem we run into. A lot of smaller tricep exercises, if we're not careful, they contribute to elbow tendonitis. And while they work for limited periods of time, in the long term, I just don't notice that a lot of my guys get the real tricep strength that we would want. In other words, your triceps might grow a little bit. We don't get a carryover to their pressing strength the same. We get some, and don't get me wrong, they have their uses. But when we start comparing like the close grip benching, board presses, JM presses, any of that stuff, my lifters, their triceps get a lot stronger more quickly than when I throw the other stuff at them. The problem we have with some of these, including even the JM press though, is that elbows can even get beat up on those as far as the tendons go, the tricep tendons. We can get a lot of inflammation there for someone who has weak tendons. And so sometimes we need to use certain smaller movements to build into that. What do I mean by that? Well, if someone has bands early on, if I think that they're going to have tricep issues, I always take a client very early on and I have them do very large amounts of high rep band press downs to build the connective tissue up, to build the tendons, to help increase blood flow to those tendons in the tricep down by the elbow. And if we spend enough time doing that, then we go over to things like the JM press and it becomes less of a problem. They don't seem to get the tendonitis issues. And while I would argue that, hey, a skull crusher seems to work really great, the problem we run into is that skull crushers can only be done for short periods of time. And there's not a lot you can do to adjust a skull crusher if it becomes an issue. In terms of the tendons, you have to just take it out. Whereas with the JM press, it's a little more versatile. If we're starting to get some overuse, we can switch barbells. Like if you have an axle bar, you can switch to that. And a lot of my guys, that helps. And almost everyone has bands in a rack. So reverse bands. And when I say reverse bands, that means you put bands up at the top and you drape them under the bar so that you reduce the weight at the bottom. And then it becomes a little more lockout oriented. That also relieves stress off the tendon. So if you have someone who is starting to get a little bit of tendonitis from doing this heavy tricep work, which again is actually far more common in some of the smaller exercises than the bigger ones. But if they're getting that problem on the JM press, again, changing bars can help. And if not, the reverse band seems to alleviate it greatly. And I've had a lot of success with my lifters with doing that. Again, especially guys who are up late 30s, things like that. And guys like me, I mean, I'll be 44 at the time this video comes out. We can be a little more prone to tendon inflammation. We have to pay attention to those things, right? We have to pay attention to those things. And what I find is that the reverse band resolves that. And you do that for a while until the inflammation goes away, and then you can go back to the standard JM press. You can do the same thing with chains on it if you need to. I feel the reverse bands work better in that regard, but you can also do that with chains. So you could actually go through a phase of doing the reverse bands, and if the pain goes away, run a phase with the chains on it, and then come back to just straight weight. Again, it alleviates these problems. And ultimately, what you're going to find with these movements, in addition to all of your other pressing, because people say, well, maybe the long head doesn't get worked enough on these. Well, you're probably overhead pressing and incline benching too, or at least one of those. And if you're doing those, that actually resolves it. That actually resolves that concern pretty quickly. But what I find is that these movements, these are the ones that seem to give all of my lifters carry over to their tricep strength. All of them. Because the rest are hit or miss. When we mess with certain smaller movements, and in fact I find even board presses don't always help every lifter as much as I would like in terms of tricep strength. Seems to depend on the lifter. It works pretty much on most of them with some exceptions. But I find these movements tend to do a great job. They do a great job of bringing up weak triceps. And I mean, to the point where I would say the greatest success I've had with doing some of this is I had a guy who came to me with 10 years of training, strong lower body, but his bench was stuck at 280 and had been at 280 for well over a year. And just by bringing his triceps up and a lot of tricep work, and within 6 months, he went from a 280-pound bench to a 320-pound bench. And I would say that's great success. Especially for a drug-free lifter, and he was drug-free. Now, he wasn't a real lightweight guy, and he wasn't a small guy, but the fact is, taking someone like that and simply applying these techniques, these exercises, and bringing up his triceps, and again, we had to do all the band work for it too, because he had tendon issues in them. To put 40 pounds on someone's bench like that, who has a decade of training, in less than a year, without having to work on a lot of other things. We didn't bring up other weak points. We just focused on triceps. And it worked. He put 40 pounds on his bench. That's a success story. So again, I tend to be a fan of these type of movements. These are things that I recommend. These are things that I use as a coach. And it's things that I recommend to a lot of you out there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.